can I start off by saying that in terms of content marketing, it's not a revolution, it's an evolution from many of the PR practices and marketing we have been doing up to this point. But the need for a fresher and a different approach is starting to emerge because, as none of us in this room would not know, it's becoming increasingly difficult to reach our communities and those we need to talk to, both in terms of time, effort and their attention. And it's becoming difficult, I think, for two basic blocks of reasons. One would be technological change, and that applies to people across the world. But one would be environmental factors which are peculiar to Australia. And I'd just like to just briefly touch on those as a way of saying, things are changing, is there another way we can come about this? Well, first of all, let's talk about the technical change. As you know, we continually live in a 24-hour, 4-screen economy now. We are always on. There are 13 million Australians who regularly use the internet. 67% of those are on social platforms. The majority of the people on social platforms are regular users. Anyone remember or I'm sure we've seen Mad Men, the ad with Don Draper, etc. Well, when that was set in the advertising agencies of the 60s, that was called the golden age of persuasion. I would fast forward that to our thing now and say we live in the age of distraction and sometimes fabrication. Can I give you a very practical example that happened to Barbara and I? We're up in Barbara's my wife. We were up in Sydney about 2 weeks ago, and we're having a drink in an inner city pub about 7 o'clock. A couple of four young men came in, young professionals, well dressed, obviously having a drink before they started the night out. And when they came in, they did two things first. The first thing is this hotel serves cocktails in small porcelain teapots. And it has all these exotic brews which you buy a teapot. So each of the boys ordered a teapot. The other thing is they pulled out their mobile phones. And that was interesting because then for the next hour that Barbara and I were there, no one talked to each other. They were totally absorbed on the screens. At any one time, 3 of them were completely absorbed with whatever was on that little screen. The other 4th, and they seemed to do it by some rotation right, had the teapot up like this, and did a selfie, showing what a great time he was having and then posting up to Instagram or something. And I thought, this is pretty interesting because if I got that on Instagram, I would instantly think, oh, what a fabulous night the boys are having. But really, they didn't talk to each other for an hour. They're like this. So that's what I'm saying. I think, my personal opinion, we might be entering the age where it's just so very, very difficult to connect with our audiences because they've got so many options. And even when we do connect, are we talking to the real person? Now, we all know that everyone today is a publisher. And the thing about it is, no matter which brand is in this room today, if I started up a Facebook, Twitter, Instagram or other account, the fabric and the feel of my platform, not the imagery, would look exactly like yours, wouldn't it? There's a template, these things. And it doesn't take much of a step for me to move from sharing information with families and friends and to actually giving opinions about your issue. Because now we have those platforms to do that. Everyone is a publisher. The other thing is, everyone is an expert. And most people will feel themselves expert on your issue after 30 minutes on Google. Now that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter if they've got the wrong information. In our minds, we're an expert. So we lose, as brands, what we're tending to do is we're starting to lose our authority. Tied in with that, obviously, is the mainstream media is changing significantly as we speak. Printed newspapers are in their 6th year of print decline. The only newspaper that increased its print circulation in the last 12 months was the Western Australian. What we are seeing, however, is the rise or the prevalence of the digital print bundle. And if you have a look at the Australian statistics now, you will find it has slightly more digital subscribers than it has print readers. Television still has a loyal audience, but whereas once we as communicators may have gone to 4 stations, there's now a proliferation of digital stations. And guess what? If you're down in Melbourne, you've got another one, Channel 31, which is a community station, which draws a good following each week. The other thing, of course, is that we are now, with our internet-capable TVs, we are going on and watching more and more online video. Now, the Australian Communication Management Authority did a study last month, I think it was July the 13th, on online video, and in the previous 6 months, so from December onwards, Australians viewed 5.5 million professionally produced videos. Now, I'm not talking about the videos that you would put up on YouTube with your cat in sunglasses on a skateboard. These are professional things that in other times would have found a place on television, on a mainstream television station. Now, radio is holding firm. It has had a slight decline in the last 10 years by about 10%. So that's holding firm, but music radio is under threat for obvious reasons. Anyone here on Spotify or something like that? Music sharing station? Okay. Music sharing platforms, podcasts, etc., are causing that particular genre of radio to be under threat. So that is changing, and whereas before we'd go into editors and producers, okay, that is still vitally important. That is still vitally important for many of us who are in media relations. However, it is not the only thing, and there's more contestable things. So they're the technological factors. Let's have a look at some environmental factors. The University of South Australia, and I'll gladly send you this if you'd like, the University of South Australia each 2 years puts out a report called the Australian Work-Life Index. And that looks at how busy Australians perceive themselves to be in terms of their lifestyle and balancing their work. Now, some interesting stats would be that 25% of Australians believe they just don't have enough time to finish the tasks at work each day. Does that resonate with anyone? Okay. Women, of course, face a double jeopardy or a paradox, because for many of our female colleagues, once they finish paid work in the workplace, in the home, there's a significant number of hours of unpaid work. Managers and professionals in particular perceive, the people that we want to get to as key influencers and decision makers, perceive themselves under pressure. And many of them will do up to 17 days a year unpaid work from home. So if you add all that up, at the same time as we've got this technological change, we've got people that are just busy, just getting on with their lives. The question I think we need to ask is, do people actually trust us? Do they really trust your brand or your agency? Do they really trust you? Is anyone familiar with the Edelman Survey? For those that don't, Edelman puts a big PR company in New York, puts out a survey each year, comes out in February. There's an Australian component and various international components. Now, basically what that says is that if you're in government, 47% of Australians trust you right now. The rest have got various degrees of mistrust. When you put a government spokesperson up, or when you put your minister or your CEO or your secretary up, the trust is still the same. Only about 47% of people will actually say, we think that person is credible. The people that are credible are not-for-profits, people like us, experts, academics, etc. There's also emerging a very, very significant gap between people's, according to Edelman, between people's expectations of government and what they perceive as government performance. And they measure this on about 11 things. Now, the most successful thing is that 30% of people think that government are performing well in one thing, but up to 58% of people think they're not performing well in terms of just listening to the community, being able to present their case. So what we've got here between technology and environmental factors, my goodness, what we've got here is a rich stew of complication in terms of us being able to relate to our audiences and to cut through. Goodbye mass audience, we all know that. Hello niche. And you might be, depending on how many niches you may be faced with, this has just increased your workload. As I mentioned, control has shifted. Our traditional gatekeepers, the agency, the brand will give me information and I will go through a producer or an editor or something. Mate, we can actually get that information just like that. We carry those devices around in our purses and our pants, right? So that we can really get that. And the other thing is, so where does this matter? Well, what David and I, when we looked at content marketing, believe that two things are emerging. If we want a sustained relationship with people, if we want to enjoy a conversation over time, we've got to offer them two things. One of which I just mentioned is relationship. We've got to have an association with them rather than just dart in and out of our lives because they've got so much going on. And the other thing is we need to offer them value. Value from their perspective, not necessarily ours. Enter content marketing. Been going now about 5 to 6 years in the States, David, probably a bit longer. Just coming to Australia, as I said, evolutionary, not revolutionary, but content is about providing someone with information that they find valuable. There's a term for this called utility. Some people use utility, which is information so valuable, if you had to pay for it, you'd pay for it. And people are finding they assign value because it will help them in their lives. It will make them look smarter. It will help them advance their careers. It will help their families. It'll make them more productive. Or on the flip side, it'll entertain them. Or it'll hit that emotional sweet spot that says, yes, I'm interested in what you say. So a content marketing strategy, therefore, you'll recognise many of the things from how we practice public relations and marketing. But a content marketing strategy for an agency or a brand would be putting together on a continuous basis valuable information and sharing it and realising you're not the dominant player in the relationship. You might be just one of many voices. And it's involving ourselves in the community, in our communities of interest. So it is similar to traditional PR, etc., but there are some differences. I'll hand over to David.